And speaking of how like voices are heard, do you think that there's anything lost in the translation? Obviously, I read this book in English. Was it written originally in French, correct? And then there's Kinyarwanda sprinkled throughout. Um, and then as Omar and I have spoke, we've talked about how Rwanda's traditional oral history is very important. So what do you think? So maybe two parts. What was the translation process like for you for this book? And then also, what do you think is lost in translation?
I really have to say that I was impressed and very happy of the work done by Alison Anderson. I didn't know her, so it's a publishing house, Europa Edition, that contacted her and gave her that work of translating my book. So she did the whole translation at once, and then they sent it to me, and I just had to make some very tiny adjustments to because of course she doesn't know Rwanda, and she maybe some elements had been lost, but at the end of the whole process, I was quite happy. And the English is the only language with Kinyarwanda where I can have an eye on the translation, because this book has been translated also into other languages that I don't speak at all. So I can't say. I just have after that to rely on journalists or friends who are bilingual to tell me that if it is correct and faithful. And I have to admit that with other languages, I had bad surprises, but with English, with the work done by Alison Anderson, and I was really really happy. I don't know, maybe the only thing that might have been lost, but really this is a small critic, is the poetry of the language, the sounds, which this is a book that I wrote just after a poetry book that I had wrote. So I was still very much inhabited with the music of the language, which you can really hear very much in French when I read loud. And I think it is there, but maybe because I'm not completely fluent in English, I didn't get as much as you. Maybe you can tell me. Did you see the the poetry and the sound, the musical sound in the language? That's the only thing, but only you can tell me.
I thought, yes, I did think there was a musical element to the language. So kudos to the translator then for preserving that. Yes, I thought it was a very beautiful book, and how kind of brings to light the importance of prose and fiction in telling these stories that are obviously the genocide did happen. And so it's a factual event, but you've brought an element of fiction and prose to it. How do you think, do you think that fiction is a good way to present suffering? Um, and why so or not so?
Hmm. Yes, this is a very good question that I asked myself. I had not planned on becoming a writer at all. I survived the genocide when I was 15 years old, and immediately after, I was very lucky to come in France and to be in a foster family, and I could go back to school, and everything was, you know, um, very comforting for me, and I could go to university. And my first decision of what am I going to do with this second chance of life, because this is how survivors live their lives, was to be a humanitarian worker. So I did that for um, almost 15 years. And it's only late after I was more than 30 years old when I decided to start writing. And so I decided first to not to write a testimony. So this is to answer your question. And why fiction instead of a nonfiction for me? So it comes from my first experience as a survivor when I arrived in France. Uh, because I realized that people were very welcoming, were very friendly. But when I wanted to tell, to testify, to tell what I had been through with my mother, because I was lucky enough to survive with my mother, I realized, I understood that many people, despite all the hospitality they were offering, expected me not to speak about my experience. And this is contradictory with the, because there is this a common impression, and even it's very often written or said that the genocide is unspeakable, and I are undescriptible. This has been said a lot about the Holocaust, for example. But for me, it was not that it was unspeakable; it was that it was unhearable. Hmm? So I decided not to speak, because I will see, and even now, some people, really close people, French people, when I start to talk about Rwanda, I see that they are ill at ease and they change the subject and they don't want me to talk about that, because, and so later, right then, I decided not to speak. And later on, some friends admitted that different things. Either they were trying to protect me, thinking that silence will allow me not to think about what had happened, and they were ignoring the fact that more than anything, what I wanted was to tell the story again and again. I needed to share that, even if, which is completely different. If talking with strangers, talking with friends is not, has nothing to do with talking with your own children. Maybe we'll talk about this later. But right then, they thought, and even people told me, "Oh, they told you not. They told us not to ask you questions." So, and others admitted that they were trying to protect themselves, because the accounts, they had seen what was going on a little bit on TV. It was really very violent, and so the accounts for them were intolerable. Is that right? Um, they were afraid that I would bring this violence into their uh, quiet life in France. So I decided not to speak. And years later, when I I decided, I changed my mind. I said, okay, I'm going to write a book, uh, um, because I thought that there were a lot of books where had been already published about the genocide. Testimonies or books written by journalists, historians who were talking about the facts. I didn't find a very sensitive and a day-to-day experience of the survivors that I was sharing with my friends. So I wanted to write about this, about what is it like to be a survivor uh, after the genocide of the Tutsi in Rwanda. And so when I decided to write, I choose fiction, because I hoped to find a reassuring distance that will allow me to be heard by the people, all those people for whom it was unhearable, those for whom the testimonies of the facts were intolerable. So that's why I decided, and fiction was also very comfortable for me because I didn't have to talk immediately about myself. And so this is when I wrote the first collection of short story. As I told you, it is entitled Ejo. Ejo, it's the same word in Kinyarwanda to it means both yesterday and tomorrow. And so I wanted to write stories of before and after the genocide. It was not, I'm not going to talk to you about the genocide. I'm going to talk to you about before and after. It was another way of taking my readers gently and by the hand, and without frightening them, and lead them little by little to the edge of the abyss of our experience, I would say. And so I wrote two short story collection, poetry, and then this first novel, All Your Children Scatters, where the main theme is not genocide, actually. There are different themes. Of course, the genocide is in the center of the story of the family, but there is also the question of exile, migration, mixed race, transmission, a lot of things. And then I realized, yes, if you have this the work on the language, and it's a novel that a lot of people can relate to, even if they're not interested at first on the story of the genocide against the Tutsi. People who are mixed race, people who have the experience of exile, a lot of people can relate it. And this is what I loved about fiction, as I have been a reader since childhood. And what I loved about fiction, about novels, about short stories that I used to read, is that I could relate to people who were so different from me, like someone from the 19th century, or a woman from India or from Russia, and then I had the impression that there were no so much difference and distance between them and me. And this is what I wanted, for people not to have the impression that Rwanda is far away, it's not their story. I don't want to to take this burden of this horror and this. No, I'm going to read a good novel. I'm going to enter in the story and get caught by it. And me as a writer, I will have them relate to our story and see that this is not only an African story. This is a crime against humanity. So it can concern them. So that's what fiction for me brings. Because I know a lot of people who will tell me, no, I'm not going to read a testimony. It's not my story. It's far away. It's too hard. You don't say that about. Oh, okay. If the kind of fiction I write, you can escape from that immediate no.